Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, X's, Y's, Z's, H's, long snappers, and the power of the word or. Come dance with us today at the Depth Chart Disco on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network with the only Chris Level. I'm KC Cowan, and today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Chris, great to be back with you, my man, and not just back for any other week, but Gametime actually is almost upon us. Game week first. As we get into the routine, hopefully you were limbering up last week. Could be too late if you waited until today. But yes, my friends, we have made it almost. The Wyoming Cowboys fitting the description of the first potential victim coming up Saturday night on CBS. And Chris, we got a lot to digest as we get ready for that one. And we will begin today in the land of the depth chart. Always a magical time in any college football fans' off-season wind down. So as we look at it for the first time this year, clearly things will change, names will come and go, injuries will impact the situation. And as we sit here today, before anything has happened, probably the best opportunity for a coach to play a little gamesmanship or exert some gamesmanship with the depth chart. So this is like their fantasy time here where they can just fool us all with ands and ors and dashes and slashes. So this is up to you, and hopefully you'll join us in the YouTube comments to let us know how you're processing what we will take in today. But Chris, let's kick her off. I'm trying to get into my football cliches. There's one for the day. We're going to start on the offensive side of the football. Let's take a look. There are going to be some that maybe are an expectation, a given, but I don't know. Maybe some got your attention as well. What do you think, man? What's standing out to you?
Yeah, depth charts are, this is just kind of one of the things we love about sports is because you love this stuff so much that people really, dig into something like a two deep and all that. But it gives you a big picture look at what one side of the ball is for your team. And we study them. We kind of maybe factor in some things more than we should. But, yeah, there's always kinds of the thing that sticks out to me about like this side of the ball specifically, and really we'll get into the whole team, but there's not any surprise here. This is pretty much how we thought it would go. There wasn't, Dre McCray now listed as a starter. I think Nehemiah Martinez being on the depth chart because, he had missed about 3 weeks of camp. There's not, and here's what I wanted to mention too. There's not a lot of like freshmen or really young pieces on this side of the ball here. This is not what you're looking at here. This is the almost all upperclassmen. And like, let me give you an example of like what is interesting about looking at a depth chart. If you look at behind Rusty at center, you'll see Sheridan Wilson there. Sheridan Wilson, in my opinion, would not be the backup center at all. Like if you were in a pinch and something happened to Rusty, God forbid, knock on wood, all that. This is just an example. You would say, hey, Dennis, hey, move over to center. Hey, Jacoby, move into one of those guard spots. Like it's stuff like that. Gotcha. But this does give you a pretty clear picture. I'll also say the position of tight end, if Mason and Baylor are healthy, yeah, this is as co-starter as you could ever want to be. You could try to either one of those guys out there. Both of them will be on the field at the same time. There's a lot of similarities between the two, but Mason has had a really good camp. I think Josh Cochran has gone out of his way to talk about how much he's developed.
Yes, sir.
It may have been good for him to sit out the spring and all that. I don't know because he's fresher, but that was really and I was curious. Here's what else I was curious about. I think that one of the biggest positions on this team is going to be kind of like that backup running back spot. And it's not necessarily what you see here between Taj and Cameron. It's what else is behind them, because there's a variety of guys that were trying to battle, but obviously nobody really won that, or they would have been listed, because we see some third and fourth team listed in some of these spots.
Yep.
But between Anquan Willis, between Bryson Donnell, and who I think may end up being your third guy there is Nehemiah Martinez. He hasn't practiced enough probably to justify being listed as there as well. But that's, again, you're really getting into it deep if you're trying to figure out kind of third string running back type stuff on this side of the ball. But there are zero surprises here.
But there will be a time where you're going to see a third option at some point. So some things will manifest as the season rolls on, and what we don't see on paper will bubble to the surface and maybe stay there, make a significant impact. You never know what a season could hold for a team. I apologize to our listening friends who take us in via podcast. That's a bad job by me, not even telling you who's on the depth chart. I'm acting like everybody's looking at it on YouTube. How about this? I'll run it left to right, starting with the offensive line. Monroe Mills, Cole Spencer, Rusty Stats, Dennis Wilburn, Caleb Rogers, left tackle to right tackle. We're going to get a little bit further into this tackle swap. We'll hear from their offensive line coach, Stephen Hamby, on Rogers and Mills coming up a little bit later on in the program. Of note, as far as backups along the offensive line, you mentioned the name Jacoby Jackson there, listed at left guard behind Cole Spencer. Landon Peterson, too, I think is an interesting guy to watch this year, Chris. Much like you were saying with Cochran and Tharp and going out of the way to mention a guy having a great camp, I feel like I've heard over and over about Landon Peterson the last few weeks.
Yeah, he was one of those that I think missed the spring because of injury. Because here's how I would sum this up. I think we went into camp thinking that your starters were pretty much set. Your swing guard, your swing interior guy, which can play either guard spot, is Jacoby Jackson. And I think that your swing tackle was going to be Ty Buchanan. Okay, so here's the developments that we've got since the beginning of camp and all that. Ty Buchanan missed a little bit of camp because of a strained calf. He missed a couple of weeks there. I think Matt Keeler had a really, really good camp. I think he has pushed his way into being an option for you at tackle if needed. Okay, so I want to make that clear.
Gotcha.
Same with Ty Buchanan. I don't think he was able to do enough to, unseat either one of these other guys at the spot.
Hey, and by the way, Keeler was needed last year. Remember?
Yes, he was. Absolutely. And don't gloss over all these receivers that we'll talk about here in a second. They're all going to play. There's a rotation, but you typically won't necessarily see a lot of the backup offensive linemen unless you're. It's a lot of times we call it the 30-30 club. Like you're either up 30 or down 30, and it's like, okay, get on in there. Yeah. So and in some cases, obviously, injury dictates it that you see some of these guys too. But you don't want to have to see them from that standpoint.
Yep.
But I think Landon really did a good. So I guess my point is the story here has kind of been like what Landon and Keeler have done, kind of emerging their way into the mix. So you're not just 7 deep, you're 8, 9 deep, and then I think Sheridan Wilson. They've got a bunch of folks that have kind of tried to play some center, in bowl prep, and then again in the spring, and then again here in fall camp. You just can't have enough depth there, and I think they know it. They're trying to go ahead and get out in front of it. That if something were to happen to Rusty, or he's a senior, and so we've got to be ready for the next step. At some of these receiver spots, though.
Let me run this down real quick, Chris. X, these are on the outside. We'll get to skill positions. X and Y. Loic Fungi, Jordan Brown, 1 and 2 at X. No or there. Y is Miles Price, Xavier White, Nehemiah Martinez, as Chris mentioned. You get to the inside at the H, Dre McCray, Brady Boyd, 1 and 2. Running back Taj Brooks, Cameron Valdez, no surprise there. And I misspoke. I'm sorry. Miles Price in the Y spot is on the inside. Outside at the Z is Jaron Bradley, J.J. Sparkman, and the tight ends, Tharp or Cup, Teeter or York. Chris, a couple of spots on those pass catchers. Dre McCray, this had to be the hope that he would come take this starting spot. Was it apparent from day one that their hope was maybe going to pay off? How did that come to be? And man, what do you think about Fungi and Brown? Because we've heard so much about Brown, but listed number 2 behind Fungi on this, at least the initial depth chart.
Keep in mind, if you were to be looking at this, you would go, well, there's 12 positions listed, and we don't have 12, because the
right.
the H and the Y and then the tight end are all kind of I don't know. It's sometimes there's one of those positions not necessarily on the field at that particular point. Yep. So I just want to throw that out there, because when you're talking about, I see 9 receivers listed, but there's also 4 tight ends. So now you're up to 13. So just, remember what I'm saying. But I think, Cowan, to your point, I think that as far as camp stories, Jordan Brown was one of the best stories on offense, period. I think he's got to go do it now. I still would trust Lubbock in a game more. Lubbock's done it. He's had a really good end of the season. He looked phenomenal in the spring and all that. Jordan Brown's just had a really good August, period. I think he's been very consistent, but now you got to go do it when the lights are on. And can you handle your business when it counts? But Brady Boyd, also a nice, because he's one of the younger players on this entire depth chart on offense. And I think they had talked possibly about maybe Squeak kind of doing the Joseph Adedire thing and maybe trying to redshirt him, but obviously not going to be able to do that. But there's just no freshman to watch or anything. A year from now, we could be talking about, Micah Hudson and some other guys on this deal, but that's not the way this offense is built. This is mostly all juniors and seniors. And that's why, in some ways, it's been a boring camp, or it's why I've said you don't really have any weaknesses on paper. That's your strength. And so it bears itself out right here.
For my money's worth, I think Brown, Valdez, number 4, number 0, maybe 2 to watch that are beyond that first level. Of course, the offensive line is packing plenty to watch. And as I mentioned, we'll get back to that and hear from their coach, Stephen Hamby, coming up in just a bit. Okay, let's hit the other side of the line of scrimmage. First, today's episode brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company, changing the non-alcoholic beer game for the good of all mankind. For starters, these non-alcoholic beers actually taste good, full flavor, well-crafted, and I'm talking not just great taste, but award-winning great taste, beating out full-strength beers and global competition. So head on over to athleticbrewing.com, where you're going to find over 50 styles of craft, non-alcoholic beer. And of course, Athletic Brewing Company brews are fit for all times, anytime, anywhere, and an added bonus, no hangover. Change the game by finding Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic beer at a store near you or online at athleticbrewing.com. And right now, first-time customers can get 15% off your first online order by using the code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for 15% off your first online order. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company at athleticbrewing.com. Fit for all times. Okay, let's hit the other side of the line of scrimmage. Let's talk defense. Tim DeRuyter's gang. And I thought maybe among the entirety of the depth chart, you could have seen the most interesting thing on this side of the football, Chris, as far as this initial one is concerned. Let's start along the defensive line. No surprises with Jalen Hutchings, Tony Bradford there, but you've got Quincy Ledette, Imarion Banks listed behind them on the edge. You got Miles Cole, Joseph Adedire. Of course, on the inside, as far as the linebackers go, Josiah Pierre, Jacob Rodriguez leading the way. Josiah Pierre listed as backed up by Ben Roberts. Rodriguez has Tyreek Matthews and Wesley Smith listed behind him. Other side on the edge, Steve Linton, Bryce Ramirez, or Isaac Smith, the way it's listed. Let's get to the secondary. At the star, the newcomer, the San Diego State transfer, C.J. Baskerville, with Brendan Jordan and Joseph Plunk, which is just a great name for a heavy hitter, listed there at the star. Cornerback, Rashad Williams, Jalen Peoples, or Cameron Watts. At safety, you've got Rabbit, Dadrion Taylor-Demerson, and Chapman Lewis listed there behind him. Tyler Owens, Plunk again, or Jordan Sanford at the other safety spot. And here's where I think we arrive at possibly the most intriguing mention on this week 1 depth chart. The other cornerback spot, which is led by Braylon Lux or Malik Dunlap, with Morion Horn there listed third. But this is where we dive in, Chris, to the power of the word or. We can start with Lux and Dunlap and the cornerbacks, or anything else that's standing out to you here on this side of the football.
Okay, so yeah, let's have the corner discussion now. I think much like we talked about at center, where it's listed that Sheridan Wilson is the backup center in a pinch. I really think in a game, Dennis Wilbur moves over there to his position last year, and then you shuffle some other things around. I would say that they feel like they've got 3 starting corners. So if let's say as we look at it, what they presented, if Williams and Lux are starting, Dunlap is the first one in. Dunlap's still going to play a ton. If Dunlap is starting along with Williams, like what we kind of expected and we thought, then Lux will play a ton, and he could start on either side of the field. There's clearly a bit of a gap after those 3. And I would say even potentially Mo Horn could end up being like your 4th corner, even though that he's listed along with Lux and Dunlap. But again, that's where you get into really the minutia of the defense and matchups and boundary versus field and all those kinds of things on what they're doing. But I think this speaks to what Braylon Lux has been able to do since he got here. And let's not overlook the fact that Malik has missed a week and a half of camp because of an ankle injury. I think they know what he can do. I think Braylon Lux, kind of took advantage of those reps and developed and all those things. I don't think there's any issue here. The thing about this side is I was kind of fascinated with who was not listed. Okay. Now follow me here. I think it speaks to your depth. Okay. I think it speaks to, who won some of these perceived backup battles and things like that. But I think it really speaks to your depth. But yeah, there's a few guys not listed here, and I was kind of interested in that. But like, I'll throw you out one right now, Cowan, like the guy that you listed as far as your kind of freshman pick, Miguel Dingle.
That's right.
I thought his name would be on here, like at one of those linebacker spots. I thought Ty Kana, who is a fairly big signee, who they talk about quite a bit, would be listed at one of these linebacker spots. But neither one of those are younger players, mind you, but those guys are not listed. And the reason I kind of gave a second glance to it is because there are plenty of younger players listed here. It's not like they glossed over because those triplets that law firm of Chapman, Lewis, and Sanford.
That's right.
Excuse me. Hold on. It's Lewis, Sanford, and Jordan. Sorry.
That is the first time this offseason that you have fumbled those 3 names. You have been on such a heater as far as nailing those names every time, man. You were due, but now you can start a news streak.
Oh, goodness. Yes. And then Charles Esters, who I considered as kind of one of these off the radar, really going to push his way through. He is not listed here. I think he's had a really good August, but it speaks to kind of the depth that you've got. And then a guy that, Zarnell Fitch has talked about quite a bit. This is a former walk-on. This is a former, I think, offensive lineman walk-on. But Blake Burris is a guy that flashed in the spring. He's done it again. And he's a really good athlete. I think Zarnell Fitch talked about it. He could go play, drop a bunch of dimes in basketball and shoot it. Converted offensive lineman, now playing defensive line, really long and rangy, bats down a lot of passes in practice, stuff like that. He's not listed either, but it speaks to the depth. And Robert Wooten, the former Virginia Tech transfer, who I think is kind of on one of those interior guys, not listed as well. So I say all that to tell you that there's depth here. Even if you don't see their names on this initial depth chart, they've got some options. And, that's kind of what I was looking at. But, yeah, the Lux thing doesn't surprise me even in the slightest. If you've listened to this show, you should have almost been expecting it.
Another one of those guys they're beating the drum for, like we talked about with Tharp or Peterson or so many guys that have had great camps. Lux has been a dude that consistently is getting mentioned. All right, before we check out on the depth chart conversation, Chris, let's turn to the specialists. First, beginning with the sexiest punter in the country. Joey McGuire's words, Not mine. Of course, Austin McNamara there. I think also pretty interesting within the kicking game, Chris, because we got a new guy there as far as field goals, extra points are concerned with Gino Garcia, but you got a transfer in Reese Burkhart who's going to take care of the kickoff duties. Kick returner, Jordan Brown, Xavier White with Price and Martinez also listed as options. Punt returner, it's Miles Price and Xavier White. And just because I'm a friend of the long snapper, why not? Jackson Knotts, Jacob Mouch. I think that may just be a fake name they're trying to fool us with. Either way, shout out to the long snappers in the audience, Chris. How about a take on the specialists?
Yeah, and I'll tell you that Jackson Knotts, man, he's a hoot, man. He's from Florida. I had him on the coaches show last year with some of the kickers and stuff, and he's great, man. And you're right. He's like, yeah, please don't ever have to call my name because that only means that he made
That's right.
He made a mistake. But no, he's awesome.
Long snappers, deep snappers, a little bit like a left-handed closer. They can be a little eccentric. In my experience.
Yeah, that's exactly right. No surprises here. It doesn't mean that you have an answer at kicker per se. I think though right. Gino Garcia will get that. He's got a long leash and it's kind of his job. And I think Reese Burkhart, here with some upperclassmen, competition that he can push him with. But he was, Reese was brought here really to be the kickoff guy. If we're being honest, that's not necessarily what's funny about this. I find this fascinating. What's fascinating about, okay, Gino's not the best kickoff guy. Okay. So we bring in Reese Burkhart. However, Gino Garcia in his college career, he's been credited with, I think, a 59-yard field goal at Houston Baptist. Other than that, all the other, returners and everything, it's kind of what we talked about the other day. I think Jordan Brown's name mentioned prominently. I think Jordan Brown could factor in as a punt returner as well if needed. They don't list him. They just list Miles Price and Xavier White there. So, and I thought Dre McCray's name may be listed at kick returner as well. So, but he's
Gotcha.
not, and I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of factored in there at some level as well. But pretty good look there. Again, no surprises.
Yeah, and for our viewers on YouTube, that brings to an end probably your most enjoyed portion of the program yet, where you didn't see our faces for roughly 17 minutes. But here we are back again. Coming up next, we'll let you take a look at a different face. I want to talk about what I think is as important of a development to keep an eye on for the Red Raiders as the season begins, as there is going on with the team, and it involves a tackle swap. And we'll hear from the offensive line coach, Red Raider offensive line legend himself, Stephen Hamby, next on Locked On Texas Tech. First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. And buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be a stress-inducing experience, but if you've ever done it, you know it can be, especially last minute. But not with Gametime. Gametime is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for sports, concerts, and much, much more. Not just fast, secure, and easy to use, but you're also going to find unbeatable deals on last-minute tickets. And with their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing and start pre-gaming. Download the Gametime app today and rest easy with the Gametime guarantee, knowing you're always going to get the best prices, and you can have them in a flash delivered straight to your phone. Snag tickets without the stress with Gametime, and just download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets and the lowest price. Guaranteed. Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts if you haven't so far, so you never miss an episode. We got By God football coming up this week. Could have taken in some over the weekend, I suppose, but the real deal for the good guys here in the LBK is going down Saturday night from Wyoming. It's Red Raiders and Cowboys on CBS. Plenty to get to this week as we prepare for that. But one of the things, Chris, that I think is unavoidable as big of a development as there is to pay attention to entering this season, because it's involving premium positions, is what's taking place along the offensive line. If you paid any attention at all, we've got a tackle swap going on. flipping left to right between Caleb Rogers and Monroe Mills. Offensive line last year, not where you wanted it to be consistently enough, but I think there is some argument you could make that they improved as the season went along. So that is a silver lining, no question about it. But, man, big year for that group to really do their part to take Texas Tech as far as they're going to go or otherwise. And it may be the group that's going to be responsible for that. Let's take a listen talking about that swap and how they fared so far through fall camp between Rogers and Mills and others. Let's take a listen to Texas Tech offensive line coach Stephen Hamby.
Caleb's had a phenomenal fall camp. I mean, it's been unreal to see him just honestly just go back to his back to the roots. We were, I kind of locked them in last year, and there's only one thing they can do, and we've been able to open up his playbook to what he's allowed to do, and he feels really comfortable over there to the right tackle, and it's been awesome for him to see that. Monroe literally looks, I say this all the time, it looks like he's having a smoke break out there, because when he wins a rep, it literally looks like he's doing nothing. So he's one of the more freakish tackles I've ever been around, just because of the fact of he's so long and he has an incredible anchor. So it's awesome to watch that.
Chris, there's no getting around the fact that with this group, which is as important to a team as any group anywhere in America, everybody needs a good offensive line. There has been serious tinkering going on throughout the offseason, even leading up to the bowl game. So, man, I'm excited to see what this experiment's going to look like, because there's some familiar faces back and names, obviously, but boy, quite the shuffle among this group over the offseason.
Yeah, and I think they had their reasons why things were the way they were last year. I think that's where maybe they felt like they just, because it's a new staff, last year, and Monroe was a brand new player into the program and all that. But I think they started to realize, these guys may be better. It's kind of like, and I think you unlock part of your brain a bit, and some guys can do it, some guys just can't. But it's like, because right now, like if I were to step up to bat, I would bat right-handed. I just simply could not even attempt and it's funny because I'm left-handed. I use my left hand to write and eat and brush my teeth, all that stuff. If I stepped over and tried to bat left-handed or golf left-handed, I couldn't do it. My brain wouldn't work that way and all that. But I think Caleb, it's like unlocked part of his brain. I think that's kind of what you hear, Hamby saying is like, oh, he was very one-dimensional as a left tackle, but we've opened up to the right. And it's allowed him to kind of be a more versatile player that they can do more things with, as far as, what he's asked to do in protection and run blocking and all those things, because there's all these people just think, you just go smash the guy across from you or whatever. There's all these nuances with the, zone gap schemes and, zone the zone blocking that they do, and then pass pro and pull in guard and all, or tackle and all that kind of stuff. There's just all kinds of different things, but I think it's just he's just kind of emerged, and I think he's had it's suited him well. And I think the same thing with Monroe. I think they just there's maybe a little luck here. I think there's no guarantees that when you do swap these guys that it's going to actually work, or maybe it works for one and not the other. Yeah. But I think in this case, it's been really good for both parties, and I think the O-line in general has benefited from it. So you just need to hope that these guys all stay healthy and continue to emerge. But been a bright spot, I guess, for sure.
Yeah, hope to see that come to fruition whenever.
I'm all for a smoke break, man. If you keep winning reps, man, take as many smoke breaks as you want, Monroe.
Yeah, it's concerning, though, that when you do your job well, that your boss is just saying, it looks like he's doing nothing. So maybe you just look a little busier. I don't know, but I love that. He just looks like he's doing nothing out there.
It's like Costanza. It's like, hey, exactly. Man, so I figured it out. If you just look really annoyed, people think you're really busy. Yeah.
What is it now?
Yeah, it's like,
what?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know the gig. All right, boys and girls, the countdown is truly on. So make sure you are saddled up and ready to ride with Locked On Texas Tech. Subscribe on YouTube, wherever you got this podcast, so you miss nothing. But the lights are on for real at long last. Coming up this weekend. Looking forward to talking all week with you about it, Chris. So we'll do it again on the other side, man. Thanks for the time.
Game week. Holy cow. Here we go. But, enjoyed it. We will be here all week. Looking forward to it. It's finally here, folks.
For Chris, I'm Casey. Hope you'll join us for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.